Making a difference and adding value are traits we usually admire. But this was always a choice, especially with businesses. However, things changed in 2013 for the first time when India made it compulsory for certain companies to spend on CSR.
If a company is making 5 crores of profit, they need to spend 2% of all their profits on CSR. In a way, they are forcing the companies to look around them and say that, hey, just making profits is not sufficient. You also have to take everyone along with you on the journey of development. What we are doing as researchers is we are looking at how do shareholders react to this type of regulation. There are arguments both in favor and against of this regulation.
There are two sides to every coin. On one side, we hear the Milton Friedman school of thought. The only business of a business is to make profit. On the flip side is the stakeholder management theory, where CSR is seen as goodwill for the company. Stakeholders would naturally like to be associated with companies who have better reputation, ethical behavior, those that add social and environmental value.
But the biggest problem is something we call as reverse causality. If you think of top 10 Indian companies in terms of profitability, and if you also think in terms of who are the players who are top at the list of contributing towards CSR, you will again find the same names. So if we say that CSR is improving company performance in terms of profitability, that may be erroneous. It can simply be the fact that most profitable companies are the ones who have excess resources and therefore they are committing on CSR. If a company is really struggling with its profitability, if it is not established in the market, then it would rather focus on its core activities rather than going and spending something on charity. Right. So this type of reverse causality is very difficult to rule out in a statistical analysis. The question is, does this CSR improve the firm performance or it's the other way around?
This was answered using the regression discontinuity design technique. In the late 60s, the US government used this technique to evaluate the effectiveness of scholarships, to see if they led to better GPAs, graduation rates, and career outcomes. For this, a threshold was set. For example, just assume that students who scored 90% and above were given scholarships. Those who scored below 90% didn't get them.
We are artificially picking a point on one side, just exceeding the threshold, on the other side, just falling short of the threshold. It's just that one group got the scholarship, the other did not get it. So 5 years down the line, if you look at their outcomes, you cannot attribute that to the inherent quality of the student because both are more or less same. So we use the same technique, same regression discontinuity design in our framework. So what we are doing is we are looking at all companies in the range of 5 to 6 crores and comparing their performance with all companies in the range of 4 to 5 crores.
So 5 crores of profit was set as the threshold. As this was an event study, the main focus was on the market reactions on the day the legislation was passed. Specifically, the stock prices of companies on both sides of the threshold.
The beauty of the event study is this is very short term in nature, and we are saying that certain activity or news or event has caused a movement in stock price. And what we found was the affected companies had a 1.6% decline in stock price on average, and the companies which were not affected, their stock price went up by roughly 0.6%. So what it makes us conclude is that shareholders do not view this mandatory CSR as something beneficial to them. Therefore, when you are forcing a company to spend on CSR, shareholders react negatively to it. And those companies which are not required to spend on CSR, the market reaction is positive for them.
But not every firm in the sample was the same. For some firms, the negative reaction was far muted. For others, it was more pronounced.
And what we find is firms in more polluting industries, they suffered a lot in terms of stock price decline. But firms which had political connections and those who were spending heavily on advertisement, they did not suffer as much. For example, when this mandatory CSR rule came up, lot of donations went to Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, building the Sardar Patel statue, to cleaning the Ganga project. It is a clear effort that the companies are trying to build their relations with the hope that there might be some quid pro quo or some sort of leniency from the government when the time comes in. So in these cases, the shareholders are aware of these ties and therefore they don't view this mandatory CSR as a big cost. In fact, it's like a legitimate way of doing business with the government.
The CSR mandate was not introduced keeping the shareholders and their views in mind. But when social responsibility, one that is fundamentally voluntary, is forced upon companies, won't it hurt the inherent motivation behind such acts? Won't it become a tick-box approach just to comply with the law? What about businesses that were investing more than 2% of profits in CSR? Would they reduce their spending to the minimum requirement after the rule?
I have a slightly different view on this. What we have found is, even though the amount of money that is being spent has reduced, the quality of such spending has improved. Because not only the regulation says that you have to spend money, it also comes up with a list of activities which are considered as CSR, which would include eradication of poverty, eradication of hunger, supporting the education, cleaning up of the environment, and there is a big list. So now the definition of CSR is much stricter. There are agencies which look at the activities done by these companies and rate them. And what we find is, after this mandatory CSR law, the quality measured by the rating of these agencies have improved significantly for the Indian companies. Right, so which makes us believe that this step by the government to force companies, even though it might not sound that appealing to begin with, somewhere down the line it is in the direction of achieving its objective, which is to create awareness among the corporates that they also have to look at their surroundings and take along with everyone.